One of my colleagues in Israel, Rabbi Ari Hasit, the dean of the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary, wrote this. Somebody sent this to me 2 days ago, maybe yesterday. He said, "Have I ever felt the distance between my life in Israel and my connection to the United States like I have this week? This week, we are experiencing the exact same event as something completely different. I am viewing the war with Iran through the lens of my survival, today and in the future. As such, even though I abhor war," he said, "I am grateful that my enemy is being weakened before he can attack me again. In the United States, the war is controversial and apparently opposed on the right and on the left. Taking away the anti-Semites who see everything in the US as a secret Jewish-Israeli interest, reasonable people," Rabbi Hasit writes, "are concerned about the breach of power, the unnecessary risking of lives, and the possibility of an entire region being brought into a war that will do untold damage. From where I sit," he said, "people in the US who oppose the war are missing the point, treating my life and the threats on it as a risk they are willing to take. But I also understand," he said, "how much truth is in their position, that I should never for a second forget that life is precious everywhere, and that this war is certainly taking a toll not only on the lives of my enemies, but also innocent civilians and military forces who are there to protect me." This week, he finished this part, "we read the story of the golden calf. For years, I have seen this portion as a fascinating Rashomon. A Rashomon is a storytelling paradigm, a narrative with two perspectives that are totally separate until they meet violently. And it is my big fear that this is what has happened here with the war with Iran." And Rabbi Hasit, for now. Each year I come back to one question when I come to Parshat Ki Tissa. Why? Why does an enslaved people freed by the sheer power, majesty, and miraculousness of God, with Moses as messenger, a free people standing at the foot of a mountain that God's self descended upon, why would a free people who has God, Be'amud Anan, a cloud by day, and Be'amud Ha'esh, a fire by night, why would a newly freed people who watched with their own eyes Moses extract water from a rock, who watched food fall from the skies, how did they so quickly offer up their gold for the crafting of an idol? It doesn't make sense, or obvious sense. So this year I tried something different. I asked myself, does the Torah actually say what I just said? And does the Torah have a compelling response? And the answer is no, it doesn't say what I just said, or at least in that way. And it does have a compelling response, in fact. Moses goes up the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. He's been up a couple times already, but he does it one more time. And at the end of that time period, the Torah pipes in to say, Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe laredet min hahar. The people saw that Moses was delayed in coming down from the mountain. Vayikahel ha'am al ha'aron. And the people gathered against Aaron, vayomru elav, and they said to him, Kum aseh lanu Elohim asher yelchu lifanenu. Come, make us a God who shall go before us. Ki ze Moshe ha'isha asher ha'elinu me'eretz Mitzrayim lo yadanu mahayelo. For Moses, the guy who took us out of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. This is the claim of the Israelites when they come to Aaron. Let us make an Elohim to go before us, to lead us through the desert, because Moses, the guy who's been leading us all the way up until this moment, he disappeared. Aaron said to them, take the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters and bring them to me. And they did. And he took them and he cast them into a mold and made them into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, Ela Elohecha Yisrael asher he'elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Israel. Who do they think the calf is? Some other god? Or God? God. Vayar Aharon, Aaron saw this. He built a mizbeach. Vayikra Aharon vayomer chag ladonai machar. He said, tomorrow will be a festival to Yud He Vav He, to God. Which God? The one who brought them out of Egypt? The one who disappeared? So early the next day, Vayishkimu mimocharat ve'alu alot vayigshu shlamim. Early the next day, the people offer up burnt offerings, sacrifices of shlamim. Those are actual gratitude sacrifices that are meant to be given by Jews. And they sat down to eat and drink, and then they rose to dance because God had returned to the camp. So there are multiple ways to read this story. Rashi, the great medieval commentator, said, Elohot harbe ivu lahem. They wanted many gods. According to the dominant narrative in the Jewish tradition, what the people were asking for at the bottom of the mountain was idolatry and not monotheism. They built a golden calf, therefore they wanted to remain idolaters. Rashi becomes the dominant narrative in the Jewish tradition because Rashi was probably the most brilliant Jew to ever walk the face of the earth, but also because Rashi's commentary in 82, was put next to the Torah itself on the printing press, meaning the first time the Torah was ever put on the printing press, it was put there with Rashi's commentary, which means for the first time the technology that would disseminate the Torah to everybody beyond only those who could afford it would be reading it with Rashi alongside of it, which means Rashi has become synonymous with what the Torah itself means. Even though Rashi never entered into that project himself, he was simply bringing options for what the Torah could mean. But he was codified, and whoever controls the technology controls what people think. And that's never changed. But Rashi might be wrong. So Professor Joel Baden, he's a professor of Bible at Yale Divinity School. Here's what he said. He said, in order for the golden calf to be a violation of the Decalogue, of the Ten Commandments, it would have to represent not Israel's God, but some other deity. What the Ten Commandments prohibits is, you shall have no other gods besides me. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. When the calf is created, Professor Baden said, the Israelites say, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. If the Israelites recognize the calf represents the God who brought them out of Egypt, then they could hardly be worshiping anything else than Yud He Vav He, meaning they assume that they are worshiping God through this particular golden calf that they've made, which, by the way, isn't not a sin. It's just not the sin of idolatry. And Aaron says this will be a festival to Yud He Vav He. The Ramban, the medieval commentator, the 13th century medieval commentator, stealing a word from next week's bar mitzvah, not to be confused with Rambam. You'll hear that phrase again. Thank you, Eli. The Ramban said about Rashi's commentary that they wanted to be idolaters, ve'en lishono mekuvan. He's wrong. His language isn't correct. It doesn't fit the context. Ramban said, 13th century Spanish commentator, it is known that the Israelites did not think that Moses was a god and that he did for them the signs and wonders through his own power. They knew it was God. So what sense is there in them saying, Moses is gone from us? We will make for ourselves gods. Why did they mention Moses if what they want is idolatry? Instead, what they really wanted, what they craved, was another Moses. Ramban says they were saying, Moses, the man who showed us the way from Egypt until now, being in charge of the journeys, he's lost to us. Let us make for ourselves another Moses who will show us the way to the commandments, who will show us the way to God. That's why they mentioned Moses, Ramban said. Look, this is not an uncomplicated story, the golden calf story, and much depends on from whose perspective it is told. We usually tell it from the perspective of the sinning Israelites as idolaters, but I actually think it's not a story about the Israelites. This is a story about God and God's ongoing and always unfolding creation story. The people were not intentionally defiant. The people were in despair. None of their achievements, their newly gained freedom, had been won without God and Moses very close, nearby. And I wish God would have intuited this. I wish God would have not left this scared, newly free people without a leader for 40 days and 40 nights. But that's the thing about God. God never really gets what it means to be human, to feel what humans feel. God is learning us every step of the way in Torah, mostly from miscalculation and then adapting. God creates humanity. It's a big fail. God destroys the world with a flood, tries again with Noah. We end up with the Tower of Babel. God can't seem to control this human creation. God disperses them. I will take Abraham and Sarah, one family. Can I get this strange creation that I've made to live up to my divine ideal? I'm going to give them a land, and I'm going to try it there. And what happens? The family settles in Goshen, Egypt, and they become quite comfortable until they aren't. And God returns to history and tries again. What if I rescue that family, which is now a people? I use miracles and wonders. I show them a clear blueprint for how to build this new kind of society. I give them a political document called the Torah, with which they can build in the land, a sacred constitution. Will that work? Well, it sounds like a good plan, actually. I like that plan. Except God could still not anticipate what it would feel like to be a human being. God can design, but God can't feel what we feel. What does it feel like to be rescued and then watch your two primary heroes disappear to a mountaintop for over a month? Can you blame them for feeling abandoned, for wanting to bring God and Moses back into the camp? Has not one of us, any one of us, at some point felt in our lives that same sense of dread to be left on our own in the desert with no leadership in sight? Does that feel familiar? God can't feel that. Rebbe Hasid said, "This Shabbat I am taking a moment to suggest that many of us are seeking what is right and what is just. In this terrible situation, there is a truth, which is that the regime in Iran is evil and has succeeded in doing many terrible things in this world. But at the bottom of the mountain, there are many of us trying to seek justice and peace. And I would add, me, Aaron, leadership with integrity." Rabbi Hasid, my prayer is that we make sure we don't turn the seeking from whatever perspective we have into a false idol that blinds us. Look, God, thank God, introduces the world to divine justice and mercy and equality and truth and sacred service. But God cannot feel what we feel when those things are absent or present. That's the vast space between us and her. Where we collide with God is in the moments for which we're both teaching one another, better yet showing one another what it means to be a human creation and a divine being smashed up into one. Look, God, how far we've come, but also please don't leave yet, because look, we've got a long way to go. And the lure to replace each other with alternatives and idols, it is always present. And I want to say to my Israeli family who are experiencing something right now that I am watching from a different perspective in a way that I can't feel it myself, will not abandon your safety. And we will continue to learn one another's experience with curiosity. I will not abandon your safety in the same way that I hope your curiosity will lead you to understand that my safety depends on a non-eroding democracy, and that we are experiencing things differently right now. We can see one another, even if we can't feel exactly what the other is feeling. It's a Rashomon. We are living a story with multiple perspectives. I will never abandon your safety, and I know you won't abandon mine either. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be true. Shabbat Shalom.